Greetings, intrepid viewers, and welcome once again to the Mental Movie Theater, the show we show inside your skull. Oh, sorry. Well, was that your hippocampus? Don't worry, don't really need that. We'll have it fixed up and reinstalled in no time. I'm Delian, your host. Tonight we have a tasty little audio movie for you about what can happen when two big-time real estate sharks start taking bites out of each other. It's called Foreclosure. Now sit back, grab the popcorn, and open wide. The young man in his early 30s sat at a desk in the plush outer office on the 66th floor of the Vestman building. He sweat profusely, to the extent of permanently ruining an excellent gray gabardine suit. His gaze rested empty on the front door to the office suite. Other workers bustled through upon their errands, now and then casting him a curious glance. What could the protege of the most successful real estate tycoon in the state possibly have to worry about? Even in the midst of recession, business was going better than ever. The boss didn't abuse staff much beyond industry standard, and young Harris was doing very well, obviously bound for high places. Just now, though, he was wound tight enough to ping if touched. The inner office door opened. Harris jerked in his chair, but kept his eyes to the front. J. Charlie Vestman ushered forth a tall blond man in an immaculate black silk suit with an expensive coat over his arm, carrying a slim case under his hand. Charlie, tall, beefy, and balding in his late 50s, wore the broad smile of a winning predator.
Trust me, Mr. Smith, this is the best deal you could have made.
Smith nodded.
I believe so, Mr. Vestman, or I've not made it.
His slight smile was somehow as carnivorous as Vestman's grin. Vestman's secretary Lana entered with two thick bound documents, the size of small phone books. She set them on her desk. The men shook hands. The faint hiss could have been the papers hitting the wood. Harris flinched, but he kept his eyes out the door. Vestman handed one of the thick stacks of paper to Smith.
You'll find all the terms in order, just as we signed them. If you have any questions, please contact me or my staff.
Smith smiled.
I'm looking forward to it.
Harris sagged behind his desk. Smith tucked the contract into his slim leather case, slipped on his sleek overcoat, and strolled out. Vestman gestured Harris into his office. Harris's eyes followed Smith around the hallway corner.
Come, Harris.
Harris jerked, got to his feet, and stalked back into Charlie's private office. Vestman followed and shut the door. Harris strode back and forth across the wide office, on the thick blue Persian carpet in front of Vestman's desk. Vestman walked around behind the polished black slab and sat in his massive leather chair. Harris muttered as he paced, arms tightly crossed across his chest.
God, oh God.
Vestman rocked back in the chair and watched him with a raised eyebrow.
What's your problem, Harris? You're going to lose that suit.
Harris spun and faced Vestman.
How could you do that?
What?
Harris pointed to the door. His finger vibrated.
Deal with him.
Vestman cocked his thumb at the door as he looked askance at Harris.
Smith? So what? He drives a hard bargain.
Vestman smiled.
But he accepted my special clause into the contract. Don't worry.
Harris was taken aback for a moment.
He did? You did? Son of a bitch.
Vestman grinned back at him.
Oh, yes, my boy. When his time comes to collect, he'll find he was in foreclosure the moment he signed the contract, just like all my special clients do.
Harris's mouth worked silently. Then he snapped back into focus.
Shit, Charlie. Even if you got that in there, it's not that, it's him.
What about him? You tell me I shouldn't do business with Smith, the man? Shit.
Harris stared at him and nodded. Vestman shook his head and spoke slowly as to a child.
Harris, you know that business forces us to deal with people we may not like, but it's not like I was doing a deal with the...
Harris's eyes grew larger. Vestman stopped, his eyebrows lifting in astonished surprise.
You think I'm doing a deal?
He looked after Smith and then back to Harris. He pointed out the door.
You're telling me Smith is the devil? Shit. God, Harris, that's pitiful.
He spun his chair all the way around and came to rest facing Harris, shaking his head.
He may be an asshole, but then so am I. So are you. Are you the devil?
Harris ground his teeth and went back to pacing.
Damn.
Vestman's laughter wound down. He wiped his eyes and looked out of the chair at Harris striding across the huge carpet. After a moment he sighed.
Come on, Harris, what's really wrong? Aren't I paying you enough? That better not be it.
He swiveled back and forth in the chair, following Harris.
You want a corner office? Your old lady giving you trouble?
No!
Harris shook his head and turned to Vestman, his hands clenching.
Get out of it. Call it off. It can't work. Nothing works with him.
Vestman stared at him, slowly took a cigar from the ebony humidor on his desk, trimmed and lit it.
You're in a bad way, Harris. You really believe he's the devil, don't you?
Harris stared at him, straining as if to hold the words back, as if he didn't say it, it wouldn't be true. But he spat it out anyway.
Yes.
He spun and padded off around the carpet again. Vestman watched him for a few more laps. He twirled his cigar, took a thoughtful puff.
How'd you guess?
Harris jumped screeching and whirled to face him.
Shit! I knew it, you bastard! I knew it!
He rubbed his eyes.
That first deal was just too sweet, but he laid it out so sensible, and it went off just like he said.
He looked up and pointed at Vestman.
And so did the next one, just like he said.
Harris struck an amazingly accurate pose of Smith, complete to the affable smile tainted with smirk.
We'll put the competition to the ringer on this one, boys.
Harris looked out the window, hands on his hips.
I knew who he was when that one went through.
Apt phrasing, Harris.
Harris twitched with a pulse of nausea.
Christ, Charlie. The deal went through because the only objector who mattered went through his own prototype microwave mulching machine.
He paced off again. Vestman waved his cigar and blew a cloud of blue smoke.
I had to see some samples of his work before I could consider any offer. Gotta admit, I wasn't expecting something like that, though. Very impressive. Hell of a finish to the plant tour.
He took a big puff off his cigar and inhaled, frowning.
But I told him no more of that. If many deals go through like that, even if you're totally innocent, you get a reputation and nobody will touch you in business or socially.
He looked at Harris and jabbed at him with the cigar.
Things just need to go my way. Quietly. It's in the contract.
Harris regained some color and slowed in his pacing. He met Vestman's eyes.
How did you get him to sign it with your claws in it?
Vestman grinned and rocked back in his great chair, emitting a geyser of smoke.
He'd been in touch several times over the years. I knew he wanted me. Badly. I thought it out. Opened an option. He made an offer. I started to take it, and the taking turned into endless, slow procedures. Checking, rechecking, listing precedents, researching sub-categories on the way to beginning to compile sub-categories of possibly relevant tertiary issues. Saturation boredom went on for years. Like to crack his skull. Every time he came, he didn't want to leave without me, but he wanted out of here so bad I could taste it. Made him punchy. Finally lost track.
Harris had stopped. He shivered slightly in his damp suit.
Don't worry, son. It deals with me, not you. Keep doing the job you're doing and you'll go far.
Vestman smashed his cigar into a sculpted ashtray.
Come on, let's celebrate. I'm buying.
He stood and herded Harris out before him. Charlie hustled Harris through the bustling office. Harris turned and stopped Vestman as they entered the plush lobby of the elevated bank.
I don't know. I don't know if I can do this.
What's your problem?
Why, Charlie? Why? You've got plenty, more than almost everybody. Jesus, you're buying, selling, leasing, or brokering major buildings in every major city in the country. Why this?
Vestman pressed the button for the penthouse bar. He gently grasped Harris by both shoulders and spoke deliberately.
Look around, Harris. This company runs itself now like clockwork. On time and ahead of schedule. You're one of the few people that just might grasp how hard I've worked to get it tuned right and to keep it that way. And me, and you, 'cause I like you, we're at the top here. We don't have to sweat the details or fuck with the drudgery. I spent my life getting out of that shit, and I'm never going back, not even when I'm dead. I'm in charge here. And now,
His grip tightened on Harris' shoulders and his voice grew resonant.
Now I'll be in charge there.
Vestman patted Harris on the shoulders.
Relax. Stick with me now, Harris. And with that contract I have, you'll have an even more powerful position when you're dead.
Harris rubbed his face with his hand. The elevator bonged. Harris shook his head.
Charlie.
Don't say anything now.
The elevator doors opened behind Vestman. Gesturing, he stepped backward.
Think about it.
Harris looked up and his eyes went wide.
Charlie!
Vestman tipped backwards into the open shaft.
I quit!
Vestman dropped about 20 feet down the 30-story shaft and had just started to scream when a rising runaway high-speed elevator car swatted him 3 stories upwards and pulped him into the roof of the shaft. At the front entrance to the Vestman Tower, people jumped aside and stared with odd looks when a young man in a damp and expensive gray suit burst out the front entrance and fled down the sidewalk sobbing.
I quit! I quit! I quit!
Vestman smashed up through the polished hardwood floor of a glossy, modern reception area, flipped through the air, landed on his stomach in a cloud of dust on a desk in front of the receptionist. She looked up with a brilliant smile. Her skin was a rich fire red. Graceful pointed ears peeked out of a flippy black bouffant hairdo. Her black dress was painted on, really painted on, a truly stunning figure. A neat orange name tag stenciled across the top of her left breast read, Gloria.
Ah, Mr. Vestman.
She frowned, turning to a Rolodex next to a computer.
You're a bit early.
She thumbed through, found his card, and turned back with a sharp smile.
Oh no, my mistake. Right on time.
He stared at her and screamed as his crushed flesh crept back into position mostly. He scrabbled back off the chrome and leather desk. He pressed to his feet with quivering arms and caught himself just before he fell backward into the ragged, smoking hole in the floor. Vestman's voice cracked and his scream died. He grunted with the pain of restanding, but it went away as his body finished reforming and he was able to speak again.
What happened?
He looked frantically about, still groggy.
This is too soon. It can't be now. I've got to see Smith.
Certainly, Mr. Vestman. I can get you a few seconds in 622 years. Just put your name at the bottom of this list and have a seat.
She slung a foot-thick bound stack of yellowed paper onto the desk in front of him with a filthy thud. He stared at it, then around beyond the polished reception area into the dingy waiting rooms on both sides. Lit with dirty, failing fluorescent tubes, they stretched off into the distance as far as he could see in both directions. Broken, mismatched chairs crammed every foot of space. They were all full, jammed with people and creatures of every description and condition, close packed in a heavy miasma of boredom and misery. The rooms were littered with thousands upon thousands of dog-eared magazines, every one of them the 1972 American Dental Association Annual Report. Vestman's eyes snapped back to Gloria, his expression darkening.
Oh no, not me. That doesn't work for me. I've got a contract that's been violated. I demand to...
The tall, brushed aluminum doors of the central office slammed open. Mr. Smith strode out and over to the reception desk.
What's this about a violated contract?
Vestman swung around, snarling.
That's right. You know damn well I'm entitled to a long and happy life before I die.
Smith looked thoughtful and tapped his lips with a forefinger.
Long and happy life, yep, I remember. Fairly standard boilerplate. All very straightforward. But do you recall Section 627B12 in Addendum 4D?
Vestman scowled.
I don't carry the damn thing with me.
I do.
Smith pulled the phone book-sized contract out of his breast pocket. It dropped open to the correct page.
Here we are.
His finger traced the lines as he read them, leaving a faint trail of smoke.
The arrangement of the parties shall be exclusive and pertain to no other beings on any plane. Any attempt by the second party to extend the terms or benefits of the arrangement to another party shall result in immediate forfeiture of the second party's soul.
Smith looked up at Vestman.
As a real estate investor, you should appreciate a good foreclosure.
Smith handed him the contract. Vestman snatched it and threw it on the receptionist's desk, raising another cloud of dust.
I didn't do that. I told Harris the deal was with me only.
Smith glared.
Yes, Harris. That's another problem you need to answer for. He was about ready to fold. This fiasco drove him to repentance. You destroyed 34 good years of work we had into him.
Bullshit. That wasn't my fault. You did that yourself. Slithering around showing off being Mr. Devil. Harris figured you out all by himself.
Smith frowned and grunted, then smiled.
Be that as it may, you promised him benefits after he was dead, which value could only come as a result of this arrangement. I must admit, I'm shocked to see you blow it so soon. Most idiots get at least a few hours of fun. I was looking forward to your assistance with so many things. Oh well.
He grinned at Vestman.
What can I say? You fucked up.
Behind him, a huge horned head poked out of the office doors in a noxious cloud of brown smoke.
Hey boss, can we get on with this? We got a schedule to keep?
What sounded like machine gun fire chattered back in the office. Smith scowled and snapped over his shoulder.
Get back in there and tell him to shut up and sit down.
The thing glowered, but ducked back into the office. Smith turned back to Vestman, glowering.
I'm busy. Gloria will assign you. Enjoy your stay.
He turned to go back to the office, from which were pouring massive, meaty, thudding and grunting sounds. Vestman grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him back. As Smith came around, his eyes popped to the size of coffee cups, blazing red. His clawed hand whipped out at Vestman's face in a blur, but came to a sticking halt 3 inches from Vestman's nose. Smith's face contorted with strain, but he could move no closer. Vestman broke into a grin under the curtain of sweat pouring down his face.
Got you, son of a bitch.
Smith appeared to be in shock. He stared at his straining hand, at Vestman, and back at his hand.
What?
He staggered slightly as he quit pushing.
Like you said, I'm a real estate broker, Sonny. I deal in property and titles, and you put my favorite clause into our contract as a rider to that really boring Section 293.dd.
Smith was still breathing heavily, tilted on his feet.
What are you talking about? I read this section myself. There was nothing to account for this.
It's that little paragraph that reads, and of this agreement, by the signing hereof, the party of the first part agrees to quit any other terms set forth herein, and the signed party of the second part, all related property, titles, and powers accrued and assigned in previous term of service to the estate and person of which the party of the first part is party.
Smith's body swelled to twice its size, bursting his clothes. His teeth stretched out and talons extruded from his fingertips.
I agreed to no such clause. I read everything.
Vestman winced and broke out in goosebumps, but folded his arms and kept smiling.
Apparently not after the 13,422nd time through. It's in there, and you signed it.
He flinched back as the thing that was Smith shrieked and leapt at him, slavering and hissing.
Oh, you fuck!
Something stopped it inches away again. Huge muscles creaked and popped as Smith tried to force its way to Vestman's throat, but it might have been trying to breathe amber for all the good it did. Smith fell away, gasping, shrinking back to human size, the remains of his clothes hanging in shreds.
Asmodeus, get out here and get rid of this asshole!
The office doors opened and the great fanged face poked back out, split from side to side in a massive grin.
Fuck off, you pissant.
Smith spun, started swelling up again.
What? You dare? I'll have your eyeballs for seat cushions!
Asmodeus shrugged its bulk through the doors, ripping out the frame and large chunks of the wall. Rubble showered across the gleaming foyer floor. It strode over to Smith.
You just squat, toad breath. You ain't in charge here no more.
7 other multicolored, massive, twisted shapes filed out and surrounded Smith and Vestman. Smith glowed bright red in fury, waves of heat washing from him. Asmodeus poked him in the chest with a greasy finger the size of Vestman's thigh.
We've been listening to you since the fall, and what has it got us? Zip, that's what. Look at this place.
He hawked and spat a gallon-sized gobber across the polished floor near the smoking hole Vestman had made.
It's a sty. The hours stink. The food sucks and there's not enough of it.
The other demons vented spine-scratching growls of agreement. Smith emitted a gelid roar of rage and started growing again. One of the other demons' hands grew faster, however. They snapped out and seized him full around the body, squeezing him back to man-size with the sound of a bulldozer being crushed to a baseball.
Oh no. No more of that from you, needle dick.
It shook him like a paint mixer. Asmodeus beamed at Vestman.
I think a change of leadership, someone open to advice from experienced professionals, is just what this place needs.
Vestman grinned back at it.
I like you boys. First we'll get the place organized, and then we can have some fun.
The demons roared with enthusiasm, shaking the furniture and shattering picture frames. The purple demon holding Smith looked at him and licked its chops. Smith stared back, an expression of dawning horror spreading across his face.
No, you can't.
The demon's mouth opened and kept on opening.
No! Hey, don't eat that crap. You want to get scabies?
The purple demon's fang-filled mouth slammed shut in Smith's face. A drop of blood formed on the tip of his nose. The demon studied him, wrinkled its face in disgust.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It snarled at Smith.
Trying to poison me, eh? So long, scumbag.
It wadded him up like a piece of trash and pitched him straight through the floor at 90 miles per. Foul steam blasted back up through the new hole. Asmodeus wrapped a sweating arm around Vestman's shoulders and extended the other to the main office doors.
Step into the president's suite, boss.
Vestman winced but held his poise.
Damn right.
He stepped forward out of Asmodeus' grip, put his hands on his hips and stared around at the circle of demonic faces. He smiled.
Let's party.
They all laughed and filed back through the shattered doorway.
Inside, the room was long, narrow, and had no apparent ceiling. It was occupied by a long, battered steel conference table. As far up as Vestman could see, the walls were completely covered with dense scheduling diagrams, overlapping operations charts, lists of bizarre materials, claw marks, fist imprints, and bullet holes. A great filthy crystal chandelier floated above the table, holding a forest of smoky torches that gave off dirty yellow light. Tall double doors of polished green malachite stood ajar at the back end of the room, letting into another office. Vestman looked the conference room over for a moment. Asmodeus and the others sat down in the hulking chairs surrounding the table. Asmodeus gestured impatiently at Vestman to take the ornate throne at the head of the table.
Come on, we're way behind schedule as it is.
Vestman stepped up to the seat and shot him a confused glance. The purple demon that had disposed of Smith stepped up and interrupted.
As I was saying before this entertaining little interlude, all the soul cycling gear on the 5th level is shot. It's been down for 50 years and the backup is starting to stink something fierce. We gotta get new equipment down there right now.
Vestman snapped at him.
So get a team on it. Yes, sir.
The demon slapped a thick sheaf of forms and a greasy file folder on the table in front of Vestman.
Here's the specs.
Vestman looked at it.
What?
The demon shrugged.
You have to design and authorize it.
Vestman opened the file. The print on the first page was so small he could barely see it. He flipped some pages and found detailed schematic drawings made of fine lines so close together the pages looked black. He looked up and snapped.
Assign it to the design staff.
The purple demon shook its head and growled.
No can do, boss. You're the only one with the authority and power to authorize it and set it up.
It reached out a grimy claw and began to enumerate the problems on the first page.
See, we got the chute traps here that are rusted open. So down here in the shredding chamber, the grinder heads are just plain clogged. And
the other demons immediately clamored for attention and precedence, shouting about research, harvesting projects, maintenance, and new construction, all of which was at least 1,000 years behind and needed to be finished yesterday. Vestman wrestled with what other pandemonium he could understand for an hour. Finally, he stood up and shouted,
Hold it! Stop it right there. I'm taking a break. You get this stuff organized so you can execute it efficiently and let me know when you're ready.
Asmodeus looked at him confused.
But boss, this is organized. You should have seen it before. We were 10,000 years behind then. If we stop doing more planning now, we'll slide right back there. None of the new stuff that's already on paper will even be dealt with.
Vestman glared at him.
Do it. I'll be in my office.
He turned and walked to the half-open doors at the back of the conference room. Deep grumbling arose around the table behind him. He slowed as he reached the tall green malachite doors. Someone was moving about in the office beyond, whistling. Vestman entered, shut the door behind him and stared. Smith was wandering around the office in a glaring Old Navy Hawaiian shirt, Gap khaki shorts, and Nike sandals, putting unnameable objects into 2 huge cardboard boxes on his desk. He hummed to himself as he worked.
What the hell are you doing here?
Smith smiled and waved as he worked.
Just clearing the last of my things out of your office.
Oh.
Vestman watched him for a moment and glanced over to another set of gleaming hand-rubbed rosewood doors to the left of the desk. Next to them was a fishing pole as thick as his wrist with nasty barbed hooks a foot across, leaning against the wall next to 3 cases of beer. Tropical travel brochures lay scattered across the floor. Smith dropped a spiky ball into a box. He turned and surveyed the room, hands on hips.
I think that's it.
He blew a great sigh of relief and turned a grateful smile on Vestman.
I really must thank you for this. It never once occurred to me in all these millennia.
He shook his head, chuckling. Vestman grinned.
What, to get yourself fired?
Smith nodded and his chuckles broke into laughter.
Well, I am one stubborn bastard.
Vestman laughed with him.
Oh, get myself fired.
He shook his head.
Walk right into a preemptive takeover, you mean?
His laughter faded to chuckles. He shook a finger at Charlie.
In the old days, I wouldn't have lost track.
Vestman leaned back against the conference room doors and chuckled himself.
Sometimes burnout sneaks up on you. Pace of life has picked up lately.
Could be. Hell of a lot more people, too. I put in more time this last century than in the whole previous millennium.
Makes sense. I guess I was about ready for a new challenge, too. Wasn't expecting this yet, though. Christ. Ow!
Vestman grabbed his mouth as if he'd burned his tongue. Smith laughed and shook his head.
Have to watch your language around here.
Damn!
That's better.
Vestman panted and fanned his mouth as it cooled. Smith levered himself upright and took a few breaths.
Ousted, sacked, packed off, shown the door. So obvious once it happened.
He smiled at Vestman.
But I always was headstrong. Incredible case of type A tunnel vision. Beat the enemy, keep score, fuck 'em up team. Yada, 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 yada.
He shook his head.
How could I have been so stupid? God. Ah!
He grabbed his tongue in pain, created a glass of ice water, threw it into his mouth, and dashed the glass to the floor in an explosion of vanishing shards. His raging face snapped skyward, his arm whipped up, pointing.
You peeping son of a bitch! Get your greasy fingers out of my mouth! I'm through, I quit!
He pulled the contract out of his pocket and waved it at the ceiling.
Hard copy says I don't work for you anymore. I am out of here.
He pointed at Vestman.
He's the man now, so leave me alone.
He paused, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. His face screwed into a wince. He whispered.
God.
His eyes rose. He smacked his lips, he felt his tongue, and spoke aloud.
God damn. Jesus Christ. Yes, he did it.
His body expanded somewhat as if relieved of immense pressure. He stuffed the contract back in his pocket and slumped against the desk. A massive fist hammered on the door Vestman was leaning against, throwing him forward across the office to the desk. Smith caught him and set him upright. Vestman spun around, glared at the doors, and yelled,
Back off!
Hey, we ain't got all day here. We gotta get through this shit before we can eat.
Vestman turned back to Smith.
What's the problem?
Smith shrugged.
No problem. Business as usual. All the day's work has to be done before anyone gets to relax.
Vestman frowned in disbelief and shouted back through the door.
Take a fucking break. I'll be there when you're ready.
Grumbling came back through. Smith chuckled and shook his head.
Doesn't work that way here. You're the boss. They can't do anything you don't lay out for them personally.
What? That's crazy. There's gotta be a better way.
Tell me about it. If there is, I haven't found it in more centuries than I care to remember.
Vestman frowned.
But there's no way anybody can do any one of those things before lunch, let alone all of them.
Smith shrugged again.
Time works a bit differently here.
He grinned.
You, for instance, are on call 24,000 hours a day.
Vestman paled.
24,000 hours?
Smith nodded.
How do you think I could appear to be in so many places doing so many things at the same time?
Magic?
Smith shook his head.
You wish.
Duplicates?
Smith continued to shake, as if suppressing belly laughter.
Nope. Sorry. Did it all myself. Even with that many extra hours in a day, I only average a couple of hours sleep a night. Any wonder I get a little testy now and then?
He looked at Vestman with an expression of pity mixed with relief.
Now you're in charge.
He dropped a final paperweight off the desk into his boxes and closed them up with a pass of his hand. Vestman grumbled.
I'll have to change the rules about that.
Smith's head snapped up with a furious glare.
What do you think I've been trying to do for all the fucking time? That I'm aware of, anyway. The rules were set up by the toughest bastard in the universe.
Vestman scowled at Smith.
I don't much care for some of your ideas for changes.
Smith grinned.
No, you used a lot of them to get where you are. Seemed to agree with you at the time.
I did not...
He reddened as he remembered who he was talking to. Smith smiled.
Good, you see? You understand.
But I wasn't trying to take over the whole world and make it hell on earth.
Oh no, of course not. You were just trying to take over the whole world and make it heaven for you. Heaven for you wouldn't be hell for someone else. Only reason you didn't try for the whole enchilada earlier is because you couldn't see how to do it.
Vestman opened his mouth, but shut it without saying anything. Smith spread his hands.
Now, don't get me wrong. You did quite well.
He waved around at the office.
You saved yourself a whole mess of trouble and took over hell directly. No one's ever done that before.
Vestman grinned.
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
Mm-hmm. With all its rules and regulations. Remember how I couldn't touch you earlier?
Vestman nodded slowly.
Part of the physics of the place and the job. Also, no one eats or rests until the work is done, and you have to tell them every step of it. Even when you get them all going, you'll be amazed at how many toilets you end up cleaning yourself just to get to a meal break.
The doors jumped and shook under renewed pounding.
Come on, Slick, move it! We want to eat in the next 1,000 years!
Smith sighed and shook his head.
I had things running pretty smoothly, but the boys are already starting to make a mess.
Vestman frowned at the shaking doors.
Yeah, I noticed. How do I deal with them?
Smith turned from watching large cracks form around the doorframe, looked him up and down, and shrugged.
Rather poorly, I'd say.
He nodded at the crumbling wall.
They'll probably take you down to bedrock before you teach yourself enough to control them.
He snapped his fingers. The boxes vanished, and a pina colada appeared in his hand.
Don't worry about it too much, though. You've got forever. Once you turn it around, two major perks of this job is that you can take everything out on your subordinates as much as you want and kick some serious ass around the universe.
He took a long pull on his drink and smacked his lips.
Ah, yes.
He turned back to Charlie.
Only hint I can give you is, be firm. You'll find you're stronger than you look. Your body will get used to the pain in a few thousand years. You should get the hang of things before you fall more than 70 or 80,000 years behind. The penalties aren't too bad until you hit 50,000.
Vestman went completely white.
Penalties? 80,000 years behind?
Smith took a long pull on his drink and nodded.
Of 24,000-hour days.
He leaned over and pressed a button on the desk intercom. Gloria, the receptionist, appeared in a puff of Gucci smoke and snuggled up to Smith.
Retirement day, baby?
He smiled down, slipped his arm around her, and growled.
Too right, Bookins. Property values are about to plummet. Time to blow this popcorn stand.
The conference room doors and a large section of wall exploded into the office, spraying flame, malachite shards, and debris across the room. Asmodeus stood behind the wreckage holding a smoking 155mm howitzer fitted with massive hand grips and a 20-round magazine. His basso roar blasted through the smoke and dust.
Oh, damn, I love this thing!
He pumped 3 incendiary rounds into the left-hand office wall of bookcases, then whipped it over to a bead on Vestman's chest.
Vacation's over, asswipe. We got work to do. Get him, Fred.
A large purple hand snaked through the falling rubble like a cobra and seized Vestman around the waist. Smith created a Panama hat and used it to wave off the dust and flames. He and Gloria smiled at each other and began to fade. Vestman gaped at them, scrabbling in vain at the floor as he was hauled back into the conference room. Smith looked up and raised his drink in a final salute. The fishing pole and the beer vanished. Then Gloria and Smith, but their voices lingered.
Congratulations on your latest acquisition, Mr. Vestman.
One executive to another, Charlie.
It's hell. Wanting is such an easy thing to do. Fortunately, we can choose what to want. Unfortunately, we tend to do it without the slightest thought, often at the demands of others, or even more ridiculous, at the insistence of others' paid lackeys. Any wonder things go badly then? Well, you must have wanted this because you sat through it. Charlie Vestman certainly got what he wanted. Of course, he wasn't as careful in picking what to want as he might have been. I know you, dear viewers, will put more thought into it than he did now, especially after this pungent example. At any rate, this brings us to the close of another fabulous production of Mental Movie Theater. Please forgive the spilled soda, scattered popcorn kernels, and sticky gummies clinging to the floor of your brain pan. They'll wear off in a few days, just think around them. And if you drink lots of Everclear very quickly and shake your head violently enough, the chewing gum stuck to the backs of your eyeballs should loosen up in time for you to use them tomorrow. So until next time, I'm Delian, your host. Good night.